Worried about work, family, or other relationships? I'm Chuck Wolf, a pioneer in emotional intelligence. When live on the Emotion Roadmap, I use a proven 4-question framework to turn emotional roadblocks into clear next steps on air in real time. Join us Tuesdays at 5 p.m., twice a month on YouTube. Subscribe, go to YouTube, type in @CJWOLFE5, and ask to be notified when I'm live so you don't miss a show. Call in when you see the number on screen. In 1990, the psychologists who sparked the science of emotions asked me to help translate their research into everyday tools. I built the Emotion Roadmap, a simple 4-question model that helps anyone improve how they manage their feelings and influence others ethically and effectively. On the Emotion Roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel. We turn worry into clarity and stress into strategy. Each 45-minute episode blends practical psychology, common sense tools, guest experts, and live caller coaching. Smart, capable people often get stuck when emotions run high, and this show helps you get unstuck fast. When you call, you help everyone else who listens. As I help you, I explain how the Emotion Roadmap works so that everyone listening is learning to use the process. To learn more about me, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. I have been very lucky in life and have worked with and learned from some of the greatest thinkers in the world at Harvard and Yale, other places, and I want to bring what I have learned to hopefully make a meaningful, positive difference in your lives. Enjoy and tell your friends and your family. And this is Chuck Wolf. You're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm bringing this live to you from Simsbury, from the studio, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight. I look forward to getting some phone calls. I want to talk tonight a bit about the NCAAs and about what it takes to perform on a stage like you're in front of hundreds of people, maybe when it starts, and maybe millions of people towards the end of the tournament. So what does it take to be really an effective athlete in key moments? Because what it takes to be an effective athlete in key moments is what it takes to be an effective human being in key moments in your own life, in our own lives. So if you have some thoughts about the UConn team or other teams that you're following and you want to share some of that with me tonight, you'll see the number on top of the screen. And I'd love to have it be interactive. So if you have a chance and you want to call, you can see the number at the top of the screen. It's 402-225-0781. And that's followed by a PIN. You dial 882-041-574 and the number sign, and you should be able to see that on the screen. So if you're interested, give me a call and just your thoughts about what's happening with the NCAA tournament. I did I did consult with a coach. I did some coaching, individual coaching with some team members on the University of Hartford's basketball team when they were still Division I, and John Gallagher was their coach. And he had conceived of this idea of a neighborhood. It was a wonderful way to build a culture. And it was unfortunate for multiple reasons the University of Hartford decided not to stay as a Division I athletic program. And I know there was a lot of people disappointed in that, including myself. But they had some financial decisions to make, and that's history. But the time I spent with Coach Gallagher was a wonderful time. And I have some stories about some of the work that I did with athletes. I particularly got involved sometimes when an athlete was struggling with trying to implement some of the lessons that were being taught by the actual coaches, the basketball coaches, the assistants, as well as John. And also some of the times when perhaps confidence was lost. So one of the key ideas about emotional intelligence is, again, how to be smart about the emotions that you employ in different situations. And so when you have to perform at a high level, an elite level, now maybe that's not the case necessarily when there's only a few people in the stands and you're an underperforming team and everybody's just working really hard to be as good as they can, but it doesn't feel like the team's going anywhere that is really meaningful from an athletic performance perspective. but it's fun and you're enjoying it and it's a good sport and you like being part of a team and that's why you're there. So that's not the kind of circumstance I'm talking about. I'm talking about kids who grow up thinking that they got a chance to play either in a foreign league in Europe or in Asia or someplace, but hopes are that they can somehow make the NBA or at least the G League, so they can keep playing basketball as young adults, and perhaps become millionaires actually if they really hit the jackpot and make it to an NBA team. And so some of these kids that I was working with had the chance to actually be NBA professionals. John was really good at recruiting. Coach Gallagher was great at recruiting, and he brought in some really talented kids who I think a few of them did actually make it to the NBA. So I did work with him a few years back, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But if you've got some thoughts yourself about how the UConn team is doing, the men or women really, the women seem like they're exceptional this year and haven't lost a game. If you're following, you know that. The men have had sort of a good season, but not necessarily a great season. They've had some wonderful moments where they win some big games, and then some crushing moments, like the loss to St. John's for the Big East Championship. For the tournament. So I think there's something going on with that team that it'd be fun to talk with other people about, and I have some thoughts about it myself. But one of the things that I wanted to say is I do want to talk about that, but I also want to make it available for anybody to call in. And you'll get my appreciation if you are someone who helps to break the ice. And what I mean by break the ice is my show is called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And think about what that tagline says. Take the wheel. Feel like you're in control. You're the driver of how you feel. Now, if you're heading down a road that looks pretty darn dangerous to you, maybe you want to get off and get onto a safer road somehow. If you're coming onto a highway and you got to merge, you got to know that you got to speed up. But you also got to know when you're getting off the highway, you have to know that you have to slow down. So emotionally, life is a bit like that, where at times we have to speed up, other times we have to slow down, and we always have to be aware of our surroundings. What's happening around us, causing us to feel certain ways? One of the things about emotions that's interesting to me, and hopefully to you as well, is that emotions are designed as a life system that helps in our evolution to keep us alive. And what I mean by that was they warn us when it's time to fight or flight, times to engage and be combative, or times to run and get away from. That's evolutionary in the sense that when humans were first created, there was a sense of there was a lot of predators out there, and some of them were meals that we were going to have, and others were thinking we were going to be their meal. So the concern about emotions is that when they cause us to feel certain ways, even though evolutionary system, when it started, made a lot of sense that we were going to have to run as fast as we can or fight as hard as we could, that's not always possible in our work lives, in our daily lives, within our families and so forth, that we can actually perform that way. So what do we do with our emotions when they heat up like that? How do we manage that? And so the science of emotional intelligence, a fairly recent science that started around 1990, not so much the ideas about emotions. So certainly we've been talking about that since humankind evolved and had words and language, and we could talk to each other and try to manage internally what's going on inside ourselves. We've been struggling with emotions forever. But the science of emotional intelligence really didn't come alive, wasn't really reported on or understood very well until the beginning of the 1990s. And we're learning some things that are really valuable, and that's the idea behind my show, is to share some of that knowledge with you. The roadmap itself, the emotion roadmap itself, came from working with the original pioneers who first discovered emotional intelligence. I had that opportunity. And they wanted to know if I could help them make emotional intelligence come alive and be meaningful. And I thought, how do I do that? How do I take this scientific literature that I'm reading and listening to these lectures and the science behind emotional intelligence and make it come alive in ways that people could find it useful? And so I began to understand that the science was tied to 4 different abilities. One is the ability to identify how you are feeling. Now, that sounds silly, right? Everybody knows how they're feeling. Not really. Sometimes we hide our feelings from ourselves for a variety of reasons, but sometimes we're not really expert at knowing what we're feeling exactly. And for instance, sometimes we're just ambivalent. We feel good and bad about something. An example of that for me was my dad passed away. My dad had been sick for a long time, and the fact that he wasn't in pain anymore was a good feeling. But the idea that I wouldn't see him anymore, or couldn't talk to him anymore, or couldn't hug him anymore, or listen to him anymore, or ask his advice for something, that was very painful to me. So you can see sometimes our feelings are mixed. In any case, what the scientists and psychologists discovered was that the ability to identify how each of us are feeling individually and how others are feeling, our ability to know what somebody else is feeling with accuracy, is a skill set that is different among every individual. So, for instance, some of you that are listening to this might be excellent at identifying how others feel. And others may just think they're excellent and actually be very poor at it. And that has tremendous implications that I'll talk about more some other time. But I want you to understand the concept of ability means that some of us are going to be good at an ability, some will be average at an ability, and some of us will be very poor in an ability. Abilities are designed sort of to follow what they call in science a bell curve. So we have those that are really expert at something, those that are somewhat good, moderately good at something, and some who are very poor at it. That's the idea of an ability. Now, if you think about abilities, you might think, well, some people are really good dancers, as an example. Others not so much, right? Others maybe can follow certain steps, follow certain routines, aren't great in listening to the rhythm and the music, but they know enough to get by. And so they're sort of at the top of the bell curve. Some are exquisite, just pick steps up immediately. That's how abilities work. So I think you can learn to be better at some of these abilities, like identifying how others are feeling as well as yourself. But we all kind of start at a certain place, some of us more gifted than others. The other is to know what emotion you want for a particular circumstance. How do you know what's the best emotion to feel for something? Like I ask people, what do you want to feel at a wedding? Well, joy is what comes to mind for most people. Okay, how about planning the wedding? Well, I want to feel joyful about that too. How about deciding how much money you're going to spend on the wedding? How about deciding who you can invite and who doesn't make the cut? Or who sits with whom? Or whose family gets to be at the head table? Or which relative? There are a lot of things that come with planning a wedding that become very emotional. And I think one of the feelings you want to feel when you're planning a wedding, as an example, best feeling of planning a wedding is to be calm, to be rational, and rational is associated often with being calm. Make sense? I hope it does. You want to feel the joy at the wedding. You want to feel the joy when you first find out that your son or daughter is marrying somebody else and you're thrilled with their partner. That's the joy you want to feel, you hope to feel. But again, the planning is something different. So that's just an idea of the use of emotion, knowing what emotion you want to feel at a particular point in time. And then what I discovered was that when you have a feeling that isn't helpful, that might be an obstacle, it's a real feeling, it's coming from somewhere that's important for you to understand, but it's not helpful in the moment. How do you change? And what would be the better feeling? So you start with identifying what you are feeling, realizing that perhaps the feeling you have is always useful and informative, but isn't always helpful. What do you want to feel instead? What would be better to feel? And then the third ability is understanding how to get from what you are feeling to the feeling that you know is the better feeling or even more ideal feeling to feel. So that's going from identify what you are feeling to what's the ideal feeling to feel. How do I get there? That's the concept behind the roadmap. And the idea of how you get there are multiple ways to get to what you want to feel. And those are the things that you have to use critical thinking skills and problem solving skills to be able to help with. And that's if you call in, if you are stuck and you're feeling like you're not really sure about a decision you have to make, career choice perhaps, where you want to live, what college you might want to go to, how to interact with a friend that's giving you some problems, some concerns, how to decide where to go on vacation if your family has different interests and different needs. what you can afford to spend on certain things, whether it's a car or a college or some kind of party you want to throw. There's a lot of things in life that are challenging in terms of decision making. There are also conflicts that we have to deal with from time to time. Challenges because people don't agree. And each person has some authority in an area where we want them to agree, but they're not agreeing. Maybe it's you and another person or somebody on your team. Two people on your team don't agree. How do you get them to agree? So understanding the emotions are involved, looking at what people are feeling, looking at what you want them to feel and how to get there. That's really important to understand how this roadmap works. And then if you call in and you got something you want to share with me and I talk to you about it and I help you, the goal is to help everybody that's listening. If everybody that's listening can hear me help you, first, you get helped. That's number one. That's the most important thing. But also, equally important to me, and the reason I do this show is that perhaps at the same time, if you don't feel like you got helped, that's one thing. But I really never really found that to be true when people have called in. I'm almost always been able to be helpful to them. And I want to encourage you, by the way, in case people don't call tonight, and that's a possibility, into this live stream, I have had a show on WPKN, which you can listen to if you want. It's on WPKN.org. And that's on at 6 o'clock tonight. And on that show, I play some past callers who called me. One caller in particular was interested in knowing how he should deal with his leader at work. The leader was a woman who tried very hard to get him to share personal items with her about his circumstances in his life, not just at work, but at home as well. And he felt a little uncomfortable with that, but he thought she was trying to be compassionate and empathetic and caring and concerned. And so he shared some things with her. And then maybe inadvertently, but inappropriately for sure, she shared some of that in a meeting he was at, and he was really upset about it. So if you want to know how I helped him deal with that, listen to the show tonight, WPKN.org at 6 o'clock. If you're through listening to this, you can listen to that later. So I want you to know that when people do call in, again, as you listen and as you understand how I help somebody, you can understand that the same process, the same steps can be useful to you with whatever's going on in your life. Now, let me talk a little bit about basketball, because I wanted you to understand what is the emotion roadmap. I wanted to spend some time on that. So in summary, let me just close with this. The first thing is, what's your circumstance? What's your situation? Give me a little bit of history so I understand what's going on. Tell me who's involved. Is it just you? Sometimes we have internal choices that we're having a hard time making, and it's just something internal, and you're trying to decide, and you just want some help with that. The first thing I'll do is be a sounding board for you. Just kind of replay back to you what I'm hearing, making sure that I understand what's going on. Then I'll ask you how you're feeling about it and how you want to feel about it. What would be ideal for you to feel about it? And then I'll explore with you, are there some ways that we might get from what you are feeling to what you want to feel? And I'll ask you if you have any history. The example I'd like to give is if you're dealing with anxiety and you want to be confident. That happens a lot to people. You're anxious in a situation where you need to be confident, or at least want to be confident. How do you get there? Well, one of the things that's worth considering, even if you don't call me, just for you to think about, is have you ever been anxious before in your life, ever, and turned it into confidence? And if it doesn't have to be the same circumstances at all. It just has to be the same feelings, anxious to confident. And was that time when you were anxious and you became confident, did it have any lessons for you that you could take from that experience? Understood, it's a completely different circumstance, but the feelings were anxious and confident. Was there anything in that moment at that time that you can take and use now? And often there is. Often there is. That's called appreciative inquiry. You can look that up, appreciative inquiry, looking to see how you can use past strengths in current circumstances. So the idea is to take what's going on, find what might be better to feel about the situation, and create a strategy to drive the new and better, more ideal feelings. And when you do that, when you go through that process, options appear magically that weren't available to your cognitive, intellectual, analytical thinking. But by focusing on the feelings in play, new options appear, almost like magic. So if you've got something where you're stuck with a family member, a problem with somebody that you're dealing with at work, and you're okay calling in, you don't have to use your real name. I just want to have something I can talk to you and call you by. Please feel free to call me in. Just look at the number at the top of the screen. Once you dial the number, you're asked for a PIN. You dial the PIN next, and you hit the pound sign. And the person who's helping me here tonight, Cole, will pick up the phone and talk to you for a minute, and then you'll be talking to me. So that's the goal. If you've got something you want to talk about, and again, it doesn't have to be that you're calling about a problem. If you have something you'd like to share about basketball, what it takes to perform, what you think of the teams that you're watching right now. I know there's a lot of high school basketball going on too. I don't follow that as closely, but if you want to call and talk about that a bit, that's fine. But I will talk a little bit about basketball now. But first, let me just give you the number in case for some reason you're not seeing it and you would like to call in. If you're ready, I'll give you a second to get ready. And pick the phone up, get ready, set, dial 402-225-0781. 402-225-0781. Now, if you got that far, you should hear something that says the PIN, and then you want to put in 882-041-574 and the pound sign. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the basketball world as I understand it, having been in the meetings, in halftime, in the pre-meetings, and on big games, on tournament games, in the Division I basketball league where University of Hartford was a member. So I got to working with John. My wife was a University of Hartford professor, and she later became a dean there. And so I was there a lot, and we got invited to games for different reasons. And as I began to watch, I thought, man, there's some people I thought really were talented, but sometimes in game time it didn't always show up that they were talented. And I thought, that's a performance issue that has something to do with mental state and emotion. And that's where I excel. So I wondered about if I've helped people perform admirably, excellently in the workplace, I should be able to do that in a basketball Division I team. I mean, it should be similar. So I approached John at one point and said, "Hey, John, I'd like to volunteer sometime." This wasn't paid work. This was voluntary. I was just interested. I like doing things, and I'm in my own business, so there are times when I can do things as a volunteer that if you work for somebody else, you may not be able to do the same things that you can do as a volunteer when it's your own business. So at some point I did work with him a little bit, I think, for some income, but mostly it was about volunteering time. So one of the players, and John was excited about that. John loved talking to me. He wrote me a lovely note for recommendation later to do if I wanted to ever do work again in this world. We had a really good experience together. In fact, one time I was at a banquet at the end of the season, and John said such nice things about me. It was really, I knew he liked working with me, but he made it feel very special for me, and I was very thankful for that. And I believe last I heard, he was coaching in Manhattan now after Manhattan College in New York City. I think after the University of Hartford, unfortunately, left Division I athletics. And it was such a strange time because so many programs fight so hard to get to the NCAAs. And when men's basketball team makes the NCAAs, the tournament in March, it almost always tends to be a revenue producer. Not necessarily in the very beginning, but over time it tends to bring a lot of revenue to the college. But I guess it came too late for John because after they made the NCAAs, that was right after that is when they chose to go to Division III basketball, I think. So anyway, that's water over the dam, I guess, over the bridge or whatever it is. It's gone. It doesn't happen anymore. But while it was happening, what a special time. And when I was there, I was watching one of John's players who I thought, this fellow has an exceptionally keen mind. He seems to know where the ball is going to go. He's really got a really clear view of the floor, sees things that other people aren't looking at, makes passes that other people don't expect, and makes really excellent moves to the basket. He's really effective one-on-one when the team needs someone to be able to go to the basket. He's able on his own to create offensive opportunities where he can create shots for himself. That's a unique skill and very important in basketball. And at the same time, he's the consummate team player. He's constantly looking out in support of all of the other team members. And yet sometimes in game time, after I watch him in practice, he doesn't show up nearly as talented as he is in practice. And I asked John about working with him, and he said, "Sure, go ahead, see what you do, and see what happens." So I began to talk to him, and I'll just call him Jim. It wasn't his name. I don't want to give anybody's real names here about things that I work with him on. But let's just say Jim. Jim, I said, "What's the story, if you could tell me, about why it seems so easy? You're so fluid. You move so well in practice. And yet at times in the game, it seems like you're much more tense and less flexible and less effective ultimately." And I said, "What happens to you? I mean, what's the difference in the feelings in practice versus the feelings you have when you're on the floor in a game time?" And he began to tell me a story. I mean, this didn't happen immediately. It took a while to build his trust, but over time, he got to know me, and we liked each other, and we enjoyed being with each other. And he explained to me, he said, "Chuck, when I was a kid growing up, my dream was the NBA. I thought I had a shot at it. You know, I was really, really good in my hometown. I played regionals. I was good in all the team athletics, all the league kind of things that were happening regionally across the country. And I was one of the best in all those situations. And a year ago, I broke my shoulder. And ever since I broke my shoulder, I mean, the shoulder's repaired now and it works, but I've got a hitch in my shot." And I said, "Okay, I've seen the hitch in your shot. I know what you're talking about. I didn't know why there was a hitch, but I've seen that." And he said, "Others, some of the coaches have tried to help me smooth it out, but somehow the shoulder just works that way when I go to shoot the ball." And I said, Okay, Jim. I said, I get that. But Jim, I noticed the ball goes in a lot less in game time than it does in practice. That I don't understand." He said, "Chuck, every time I'm on the floor, every time I'm out there in a game when it's meaningful, I just feel like my chance to be great was stolen from me. It was stolen from me because I broke my shoulder. I've got a hitch that takes my shot a tiny bit longer to get off, and it means defensive players have more time to try and block or stop my shot." And I said, "Jim, I can understand how you feel that way, why you feel that way, but I also got to remind you again, I didn't know you broke your shoulder. I didn't know your shot was ever any different than what I see you do now. What I do know, Jim, is in practice, in my mind at least, you're the team's best player. But in game time, you're not as good." And he thought about that for a bit, and he thought, "You're right. I'm not." And I said, "Is it because in practice, the dream of going to the NBA isn't uppermost in your mind? All you're thinking about is just playing the game because it's just practice. It doesn't really have the same consequence as whether you win or lose a game in a league." And he began to think about that, and he began to realize that what if I played with the same joy and the same ease and the same comfort level as practice? What if I didn't put the pressure on me and I stopped with, "Woe is me. Ain't it awful about what happened to me? And now I can't perform in game time. But why am I not performing in game time when in practice I'm so much better?" Now, this is a summary of a lot of conversations. It didn't just happen in a moment's time. But once we got to where we needed to get to, it changed for him. He played as good as he was in practice. That's how he played on the floor. And maybe, because I never saw him before he broke his shoulder, maybe he was better before the shoulder ever got broken. But he was the player I saw in practice in game time after we'd had those conversations. Because emotionally, he changed how he felt in game time. He recognized how important it was in game time to feel like it could just flow, that let go of the negativity, let go of the anger. Whatever happened, happened. I'm still a hell of a player. I'm still a competitive player. I'm still one of the best players on the floor. Now, maybe I make the NBA or maybe I don't. Maybe I make one of the European leagues. But I'm going to play this game to my fullest ability, and I'm going to enjoy it like I enjoyed it before my shoulder ever got broken. Stuff happens in life. You deal with it. You move on. And you make the best of whatever circumstance you face. And with that attitude, that season was a great season for their team, partly because Jim played so well at such clutch times. He wasn't afraid anymore to go up for that shot, hitch or not. And that made a big difference. So sometimes understanding a player's story, an individual story, not even think of them as a player, but just a human being's story, understanding what is driving what's happening to them, and being a good listener, really hearing what they say, earning their trust and allowing and asking for permission to share what you're seeing that might be different than how they're feeling or seeing themselves. And being trusted enough to be able to offer counsel in a way that it was accepted and made life better. That's the goal for my phone calls, folks. So if you want to call in and you want to talk to me about your thoughts about any of the players that you know personally, or maybe you're a player yourself and want to talk about that, or maybe you've watched some teams and you have some thoughts and you'd love to share them, I'd love to hear from you. You can see the number on the screen. So if you want to call, please give me a call. Let me know what you think. I want to talk a little bit about UConn, and then I'll go back and tell you a few more player stories if I don't get any calls. So when I watch the UConn basketball team, I think what's missing on this team is having a Rip Hamilton. Those of you who have watched basketball for a long time know Rip was one of the best players to play for UConn. He went on to have a great career as a Detroit Piston. He won some NBA championships. He was a member of that first team that Jim Calhoun had, who won the championship with Khalid Al-Amin. Rip Hamilton was the go-to guy, though, the scorer. Ray Allen was a great scorer for the UConn Huskies at one time. These are guys that can get to the rim on their own or fake a guy out and take a shot and make a shot from distance, make a three-point shot with a lot of accuracy, and get themselves free enough so that they can get the shot off without it being blocked. And they can do it during crunch time, at times when it matters. Kemba Walker was another superstar. I can remember great moments when Kemba was like the key. And you knew if you had a key guy you could go to, you can count on, the rest of the team played to their fullest and utmost because they knew in crunch time they could count on that key guy. I don't think this UConn team has that key guy. What they have had is different people being a key guy in a game. If you're watching the tournament, you know Taris Reed had a monster game, an unbelievable game, really. He had 31 points, I think, and 28 rebounds or something. I think the statistic was it hadn't happened since 1998 in a college game. So, that's a remarkable game. But that's not Taris Reed every night. Alex Caravan in the in the game that they just played the other night, Alex Caravan had an amazing night, 25 points. And he was great. But I've seen nights where Alex Caravan can't get his shot off. So he's not that guy. Taris isn't that guy. This Brandon Mullen, the young freshman, supposedly here for a year, maybe going to the NBA next year. I don't think he's NBA ready myself. But he can be that guy. But he isn't yet. He's had some moments where you think he could become that guy. He hasn't yet. And Solo Ball's having a tough, he's playing hard. He's playing defense, and I really love him. But he's having a tough time shooting the ball. People thought he might be that guy. Stephon Castle, similar kind of player. He's having a great season now for for the Spurs, the San Antonio Spurs. He was a UConn player who was that guy for a while. So, I think solo ball possibly could be, but hasn't been so far in this series anyway. So where are you finding that guy? And I think without that guy, you have to have somebody somehow step up and become that person on a given night in order to keep going. But I'm thrilled. I mean, the statistics with UConn, it's funny. When they've got to the Sweet 16, apparently, they've won championships. Otherwise, they're out in the round that they just finished winning in. So if statistics hold up, they got a shot at this thing. And St. John's is fun to watch because they got a guy. Their center's really a really talented kid. And he's playing lights out. And they just won a great game. And they're playing Duke coming up on Friday. So there's two, I guess, the UConn team is playing Michigan, Tom Izzo's team. And Tom is a great coach, too. And I think it will be a great game again between two great coaches. And I think that the Duke team against St. John's, that'll be an incredibly fun game to watch because Duke is a number 1 seed and one of the best in the country. And I think St. John's can play with them. I think they can play with anybody, really. I think they're really talented. And Rick Pitino's a good coach, too. So I think it's fun to watch. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, I've got a few more minutes while I'm on the air. Again, the number to call is 402-225-0781. And the PIN 882-041-574 and the number sign. So what do you think is happening in the NCAAs? Do you have a favorite team? Did you get into the bracket? Is your bracket still alive? My daughter and I were talking about that today, and she did play in a bracket, and she had Florida winning it all. A lot of people did, and Florida was the number 1 seed. They won it last year, and they're gone. They lost. That's what's fun about any sport, I think, is you can have all the best players and you can have the best record, but you got to play the game, and anything can happen in the game. That's what's fun about sports, I think, about athletics. So I guess let me tell you another story or two about some of the athletics help that I gave. One of the players I was coaching, coaching them in my way. I wasn't their coach, the basketball coach, but I was coaching them around dealing with emotions more intelligently. So one of their players was a very talented young man, and he played forward and center sometimes. He was about 6'8", I think, and he was a little small for center, but he didn't have quite the forward moves that you need to be an elite forward. So he was kind of an in-between forward and center because he was broad and big and tough, and he was a good rebounder, and he was a good defender, except that when he defended like this with his hands out. And when players would jump up, as they do if you watch basketball enough, they jump up and they hit your hand because it's over them, it's a foul on you. It's a foul on you. The coaches were trying time after time to get him, keep your hands straight up. Go straight up. They won't call the foul, or at least they won't call the foul as often. They can still jump into you, and they can still possibly say that you hit them with your body, but it's not the same. If your hands are over them, they're almost always going to get the foul call. And they were struggling with him. I thought to myself, I wonder how I can deal with him with this. And we had a nice relationship. We had a pleasant conversation from time to time during the course of the season. And I said to him, let's call him John. I said, John, I know you struggle with this, and I think it's I know that the coaches have talked to you about it, so I'm not going to say anything that you don't already know that you're supposed to do. But let me give you a little different way to think about it. Because again, I wanted to see how can I change his emotional state around this stuff. Because he really felt that trying to defend like this was the best way to be to be a really effective, a defender. Because when somebody went up, you'd have your hand right there and you could be on the ball, smack it down, right? One of the things that happened was I said to him, if you ever watched any of these shows, whether FBI or any of the police shows or any where you see somebody, in a hold-up situation, tell people to, okay, stick up your hands, right? And I said, you ever see that? And he said, oh, yeah, sure, of course I've seen that. I said, okay, well, when they say stick up your hands, If they said it to you, what would you do? And he put his hands straight up in the air. I said, John, every time you go to defend, think of it that way. Hands up in the air. And he laughed, and I laughed, and it was better. So I got a caller. So sure, go ahead. Can you tell me our name I can call you by?
Hi, my name is Alex.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for the call. What's going on for you?
So there's this like webcomic I've been reading called Chainsaw Man, and it just had its series finale today.
Okay.
I'm kind of disappointed that it ended because it's just been something I've been like, it would come out like weekly every Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
And it was just something that I looked forward to on Tuesday. And
So, yep.
the ending was just kind of whatever.
So you're disappointed, and disappointed in two ways. One, that the ending wasn't great, maybe, but also that it ended at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say, you have anything that you can? Are you looking for help in terms of trying to find something to replace it, or just how to deal with it?
More so just how to deal with it.
Well, okay. So if I don't know how much you heard of the show, but one of the things that I ask you is that have you had other things that you've really enjoyed end, and you felt like, man, I wish it was going on, and it's not, and yet you found ways to find other things that became interesting and enjoyable for you to do in place of those things that ended. Has that ever happened to you before?
Yeah, it has.
So if you can think of anything from the past, this is always an important way to think about this, is that rather than me just tell you what you should feel, Alex, is it Alec or Alex, by the way? I'm sorry, was your name Alec or Alex?
Alex.
Alec?
X with an Alex.
Alex, okay, thanks. I just want to be sure I was getting it right. So, Alex, if you can think about some time in the past where that's happened to you, is there anything you might take from that other experience that might be helpful here, as opposed to me just telling you what you should do?
I don't know. I'll probably find something else, and it'll probably get better.
Is that what happened in the past?
Yeah.
So one thing that you can glean from what I just asked you is that you can be hopeful that something's going to take its place. It might not be as fast as you want, but something's going to pop for you that will, find a way to make itself more valuable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing to think about, Alex, is that as you engage in stories or activities that have a beginning and an end, they're always going to end. And you enjoy them for the moment you have them, and at some point you're going to have to move on and do something different. Some things aren't like that, but many are. Make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you may want to work on and think about is, okay, it wasn't the ending I wanted. I enjoyed the heck out of it when it was going on. I got to believe, Alex, by the way, that you're not alone in this, and that's another thing that's helpful to realize. I mean, so many people there's a lot of series now. Everybody's driving content for places like Netflix or Paramount Plus or Disney Plus, where they're trying to create series just like the one you just finished with the web comic, where it's like, hey, we got people coming back every week. And then somehow we got to close it because the people don't want to be in it anymore, or somehow it's going to be over. And sometimes the endings aren't nearly as good as all the shows that we've watched and the journey that we experienced being on it. That's why some people like to say, it's not about the end. It's about the journey that's so important and to appreciate as you're going through it. And so knowing that lots of people experience this may be helpful to you as well to understand and think about. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay, well, I want to say I appreciate the phone call. Are you anyone who watches any basketball? Do you have any concerns or care about the basketball world?
No, I don't really watch basketball that much.
Okay, well, I do appreciate you calling in, and thanks a lot for the call. And again, as I said to you, I think one, you're not alone. Lots of people having this experience too. There are going to be many things in your life that are going to be enjoyable. Enjoy the ride while you're on it, and know that the end of the ride might not be nearly as enjoyable as the journey itself. And focus on the journey while you're on it, and appreciate that part of it. And also recognize that just like in the past, when other things have ended that you've enjoyed being part of, you found other things to take their place. That's the summary. That help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate the call.
I appreciate you calling in too. Thanks a lot, and you take care.
All right. You too.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, well, I appreciate the call, and I really do. If somebody else wants to call, you got, I guess, just a minute or so maybe not. But, I'm going to be on. I'm on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. The show is The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm happy to talk to anyone about anything. And if I can be helpful, I'm going to try to be. So I appreciate Alex calling and all of you who are listening. I hope you got some insights into basketball. I will tell you just one other thing I think is important around the basketball story. Sometimes when people have really just kind of lost their confidence, they lost their way, they're really talented kids, and they just don't seem to be performing. And it's not about a broken shoulder. It's not about something that happened, a single event. It's just how they're dealing with life right now. One of the ways I've helped people, and this isn't just basketball, this is about life, is to reconnect them to, why did you ever become a basketball player? Can you think back to the time when you first touched a basketball? Maybe when you played with your friends or with your family, maybe with your dad or an uncle or a big brother. Can you rekindle those feelings, that joy that came with it? Can you reconnect to your past in some meaningful way? And sometimes by helping people to remember the past, to go back to the time when they first became interested and then excited and then passionate, when all that happened, you can sometimes bring people back to that state where they feel like, you know what, I'm going to enjoy this again. I'm going to really go out there and have fun. And as I have fun, enjoy myself. So thanks everybody for listening. This is Chuck Wolf. You've been listening to The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And I'll be with you again on one of the following Tuesdays. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
For over 40 years, SCM
has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education,
and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.